Okay, welcome everybody back to our session today. I'm so happy to introduce you to Cynthia Fehr, who I've known for a few years now. I met in traveling around Alberta, and she has been a very inspirational person to me, raising amazing teenager who's probably not a teenager anymore, but but anyways, I think you're going to really enjoy Cynthia's story. And Cynthia, take it away, dear. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Judy. I have loved getting to know you as well. And yeah, so I'm from Medicine Hat, Alberta, and Judy is right. I do have two teenage boys, and it wasn't so long ago that they were tiny, and now they're going to be 17 and 14 in a few days. And in a matter of a few weeks, I'll be married 20 years. So we haven't always lived in Medicine Hat. And we homeschooled for about 6 months when we were living out east, which was really quite an inspirational time for me, realizing how much kids soak up in a short amount of time without any books. It was fabulous. And then when we moved here to Medicine Hat, it was their kids that actually pushed us to home educate, because they both just weren't getting out of school what they were hoping to get out of school. And both of them really struggled with high anxiety. And we were just like, what are we doing? Like, we've got to, figure out a way to facilitate this. So it's been about 4.5 years now, and we all love it. We all love it. However, in the midst of all of that, we have had our challenges. Our youngest boy, when he was about 2.5, 3, he was diagnosed with autism, developmental delay, anxiety disorder, and sensory processing disorders. So we had a whole gamut of things on our plate. And that is exactly what I want to share about this morning. But I also want to encourage you that this does not pertain just to kids with diagnosis. I just wanted to give you that heads up as to kind of where our story came from. So from the time our kids are born and through their growing up years, we desire a strong bond with them. But like I talked about, there's these circumstances, possibly diagnosis, and even behavior that can war against this. And I'm Cynthia Fehr, like Judy introduced, with Calm Raging Waters, and it truly is a pleasure to spend time with you this morning. But why Calm Raging Waters? It comes from the extreme rise and fall of emotions that we process through with our son and ourselves. He collapsed multiple times a day. He shut down physically and even verbally. Sometimes he would run away. Sometimes he jumped out of moving vehicles. Sometimes we lost skin. We were spit on, kicked and punched, and all sorts of things. So if you're dealing with any behaviors such as that, you are not alone this morning. But I would like to paint you a canvas today with words in a story form. And then I'm going to pop on for video for the questions at the end. So are you dreading the summer unlike all your friends? You haven't booked anything yet, no tenting spot, no kids' summer camp, no sports week, no traveling whatsoever. And that's not due to COVID. This is due to the child. You're afraid to plan. Long drives are not typically welcomed by your child with difficult behavior. It's not even the question, are we there yet? It's how many seconds? New groups and new people can be so overwhelming. Then there's being away for the night. It might even be that to leave the house to go to the local swimming pool takes such planning and preparation, it hardly seems worth it, especially when you remember the times when you made it there and it was time to get changed and your kid goes all quiet and stands outside the changing room. You just know that the swimming is not going to go as planned. You see him slumping over and his bag slides down his shoulder and rests on the damp floor. Anxiety rises in you and your heart sinks. Either one parent sits out with the one who now refuses to go in the water, even though he loves swimming, or you'll have to leave because you cannot send your other children into the pool unsupervised. There's a whole other dialogue that goes along here that I won't get into this morning, but I'm sure that you can imagine what's all being said here. Tears, wailing, and worse. So now you're on your way home feeling deflated, possibly angry, and everyone is disappointed. You are looking in the rearview mirror at the other child who missed out on swimming once again because of this child with the behavior, and you can't help but wish you could fix it all in a moment. But wait, another dilemma surfaces. The child that refused to get changed and go swimming is now begging to go back. Ah! It's chaotic. We went through this, I don't know how many hundreds of times, and not just with swimming, riding on an elevator, attending a costume party, somebody's birthday or play date. I could never seem to get it right. I couldn't help him understand that I couldn't make things happen again when time had passed and he missed the chance. Questions, ideas, firm tone, nothing helped. Sometimes I was so frustrated I yelled because I didn't know what to do or how to help him. And I simply hated that he missed out on so much because of this. It was heartbreaking to watch him collapse over these things. But so often he didn't just kick and scream and cry on the floor. Many times he came after me with those flying feet, flailing arms, and hard punches. I've been spit in the face more times than I care to remember. I've yelled louder than I ever knew I could, with anger that came from a place that only he could find. And I've tried to hold his arms and pin his legs to avoid bruises and scratches, only to end up with a bite mark on an exposed area. How does a parent who loves their child navigate this world with at any second you could step on a landmine? Because once it detonates, and there's very little warning, as you already know, it may take hours before the debris stops flying. By then, you and your challenging one are completely depleted. Once they've moved on to something else, you stare at the damage and shakily start the cleanup. Looking through the rubble, you search for a sign as to what set her off this time. You make your best guess from a few of the pieces, but it's never quite certain. You're just bracing yourself for the next eruption. And I want to take you to another part of this. What I mean by that is your world feels almost secret because I'm pretty sure that you as moms and dads may be the only ones that really see this in action. Your child looks typical to everybody else. Other family members might see this in its mildest form, but all hell breaks loose behind closed doors, in vehicles too, and this makes you feel like an alien. Like you've lost complete control of your life and it's spinning down to unfathomable depths. Maybe even teachers say, he's so wonderful at school, all the students like her. So the scariest thing is to actually share with them the nitty-gritty, sometimes horrifying facts, and this only leads to the isolation. So let's step into this for a bit, because this is probably the hardest part of all of it. You are alone when this happens. Sometimes you've got sidekick dad, but during the day, he's not around when these meltdowns happen. And it's hard to talk about because the few times you've mentioned it out on the playground to friends, and maybe even to family, they don't get it. What do you do with that? First of all, isn't home supposed to be the safe place that your family comes to after a day out in the big old world? Wasn't there supposed to be everybody sitting at the table telling tales of the day as the dog sneaks between your legs to catch the peas that fell off somebody's plate? But here you are, ready to burst out of the door and blast off to Bermuda on a one-way ticket because your house is crazy town. Here is 3 things that I want to share with you this morning that will help when nobody, in quotation, sees what's really going on with your inflexible child. Number 1, find 1 or 2 people that you trust. Plan a scheduled visit with them, free of distractions, and walk them through what's happening at home. Write this out beforehand and read it if you feel more steady. Most likely tears will come, so take your time. But you need to be clear before you begin. You are not asking for their advice. That's actually the last thing you need. I know you want answers, but they are not the right people for answers. This is just the start of building a supporting community of people around you. But for now, this person just needs to listen. Share as much as you'd like with them to know at this point. The other thing I'd like to mention here is that this person should be healthy. And what I mean by that is to choose someone in your life who is seasoned and strong, not someone who is as bogged down in life as you are. Otherwise, your conversations and time together will end up with you holding them up rather than a valuable visit. If you don't know of someone, begin praying for it. This is part of why I do what I do, is to help people connect and get the support that they need. Number 2, write. W-R-I-T-E. Write about the ups and downs. Like, how am I going to have time for this? I can hear you asking already, but you must. What is so crucial about taking the time to do this is that it's so important to be able to go back and have a very definite idea of how far you've come. It helps you grieve and move past the losses, but more importantly, it'll encourage you to celebrate even the smallest of steps ahead. A journal becomes part of the core of what keeps you from falling apart on the down the toilet days. It's a secret place where you can share what no one else would understand, and it helps your process immediately right where you are. It will calm you, bring tears, and I promise in years ahead, you will go back and read through these years of how you got through what you are thinking right now is impossible. It's your very own book of miracles, is what it becomes. Number 3, you have the best view in the house. Ask any mother and not one will say she wished for a child that was challenging. But if I asked you what you see beyond the explosive meltdowns, a smile will eventually come to your lips. It's innate in us to deeply love our children. Some days will be difficult to do. However, love remains no matter the war between our kids and us. My husband and I sat with an OT one afternoon before the end of the school year. We were getting ready for a big move and needed some paperwork filled out for our kids before we left. You will always be the best advocate for your child. You are with them nearly 24/7. Who could know them better? It's hard for us to say nice things to ourselves as women, let alone our role as mothers. But sitting across from this woman, this occupational therapist, who could without hesitation declare this over me, well, I tell ya, I let it soak in as deep as it would go. At this point, I was in desperate need of encouragement. You may not always know what to do when things go loopy, but you know exactly how thin he likes his banana sliced and his peanut butter and honey and banana sandwich. You know exactly how far she can swim on her own before her chin dips below the water's surface and she reaches to grab your hand. She may be afraid of horses, but will sit all afternoon with a pile of kittens in her lap. And you know at almost the exact moment after he goes to the bathroom that he will call, "Mom, can you wipe?" There's no one, absolutely no one, who can fill this place in your child's life like you. That's why you feel like you're failing. This is why you are buried under so much guilt when you can't seem to figure it all out. Because if you can't do it, who can? Now we move on to what the heck do I do when this happens in front of family or even possibly the grocery store? I would have to say for me, this was the hardest of all. Alone at home, I knew what we were doing didn't always work well. But here out in the open, everyone was watching, staring, wondering, and most fearful of all, they were judging. Some people, family or strangers, are silent as they see all hell break loose. Others are not so silent. So whatever kind of dagger looks or judgments you feel are being thrown your way, you're going to have to put on your horse blinders. You know, the peripheral vision covers that only let the horses see forward, not around. What is most important here in these situations is the dignity of you and the dignity of your child. Why? Because your kid needs to know that you are on their side all the time, even when everyone is watching. Do you think that they want to have their difficulties flashed in public for all to see? Do you believe that they have full control over these outbursts? If you do, then you will always have a fight on your hands. You will always be their opponent, and in turn, they will remain in defense mode at all times. Kids are very aware as to who's on their team and who's not. So much of how they sense this is not through emotion. It's often muddled because sensory difficulties skew this quite a lot. Your words are only going to get you so far. The rest will be in your actions. So how can you help them let their guard down? I would crouch down beside my son's chair and say to him, Dad and I are on your side. We're on your team, dude. We are here for you, not against you. Immediately he'd retort, no, you're not. He actually was right. Up until then, we really hadn't been. In my heart, I was, but outwardly, it was not adding up for him. I became increasingly aware that as many meltdowns as he had had, and he didn't feel I was there for him, that's how many more times I would have to prove to him that I was suited up to help battle on his field, not mine. I was reminded that he saw my armor as a protection from him, not for him. So get a visual and Google horse blinders. Those horses have one target, no concern for the distraction taking place behind them or beside them. From where you sit, most onlookers are bewildered. What you imagine they're thinking fuels your insecurities as a parent. The importance of training yourself to close in your peripheral view so your one and only focus is your child. They can be great and mighty and push through all the wild things on the inside if they know there's a warrior at their side. Countless times I called for my husband to come and help us sort through. If he could come, we waited for him. If you've no one, then scan the crowd and look for a calm person nearby. Pull all of the brave that you have on the inside of you and ask if someone could maybe move your cart or set your packages in a safe area for you. Because sometimes this happens out in the open, in a grocery store, in the middle of a lineup. And sometimes things got very severe for myself and my youngest son, escalating to throwing things or ramming me. So you may have to think quickly to find an area out of harm's way. If the floor is dirty, oh well, sit yourself down. Getting low helps your child know that you're not afraid of them and are willing to enter their space. This alone will start the calming process. I can hear you saying to me, but this is so hard to do in public. What will people think? Yes, it is. It is going to stretch you farther to a place that seems impossible to reach because fear causes incredible amounts of resistance. But what you are creating is a small little world that shields your child from all else that is going on. So all they need is to draw from you. It will take some time to learn how to do this, but each time new ideas will come as to what to do when you are faced with meltdowns in public. And the last part that I want to share with you is an experience when visiting family, because this sometimes is the hardest part. It's mealtime with our extended family, food galore, cousins everywhere. It's loud and crowded, prime setup for my son to be overstimulated, trying to shake off all the well-meaning touches from aunties and grandma, not to mention all the expression of emotion that is exchanged between everyone. This is quite tricky area for sensory kids, especially kids on the spectrum. It's overwhelming, to say the least, to match which face with what emotion. And are any of them directed at me? If so, what does it mean? You add any kind of joke or sarcastic remark, albeit in fun, and you have a recipe made for a tornado. This is why it's incredibly difficult to decipher what exactly caused the blowout that day. And I'm sure you've got an incident in your mind already, picking through the events, wondering how come the explosion was so huge. What I did right was to get him separated from the herd into a bedroom down the hall. His go-to was to grab his blanket, throw it up and let it fall over him as to not see anyone and hoping no one could see him. It was his own natural separation and attempt to calm himself. So far it was working, and he had come down from 10 to about a 7. Then the door opened and my mother-in-law came in. The intention behind her entrance was to help, I knew. But boy, in seconds flat, as soon as my son heard her voice, he dove behind the bed to get away. My anxiety was rising at this point, and what I wished I would have had the courage to do was gently tell her that I'm so glad she thought of helping, but I think he needs things all quiet for now. But I turned on my son. I sided with her in a way, and I let her get too close so she could continue to talk to him and coax him to come out and play with the other kids. What was I thinking? It was harmless enough, right, to let someone help in this way? Yes and no, because it depends on who it is. I have 3 sisters. They're all wonderful. Yet in this stage of my young son's life, he would only let a certain sister comb his hair. She lived 4 hours away, so for most of his growing up years, his hair was a mess, even I, as his mother, could not brush his hair. Had it been her that day that entered the room, things would have gone quite differently. The connection they had could have been what kept him at a 7 and eventually declining, where he could have re-entered the world outside that door. Alas, that's not what happened. Within seconds of my mother-in-law being in that room, he was bursting at a 10. Him and I. Helpless takes on a whole new meaning when you're faced with these circumstances. You miss out on a lot of hiding out with a raging child in a small back bedroom, feeling like you're losing your sanity in your life. Now that the grenade had gone off, we just had to wait for the dust to settle. Later, mother-in-law and I had to have a very awkward conversation about what had happened earlier. She'd never experienced a child with such intensity. So when she was gracious enough and apologized, realizing that her actions put fuel on the fire, I was able to speak openly about what we could maybe do next time, what she could do to help me so that I could best help him. Number 1, teach them about your child and set firm boundaries. Most people don't have a clue about what you're going through, but one step further, they have no idea of what your child is going through. They maybe raised their own kids already and are going by what may have worked for them. And family's always tricky because they love you and truly want you to excel in your life, but this can come across as interference. Add this to a child's meltdown when you are completely drained and an all-out family feud can erupt. You're going to have to get confident in speaking to them on behalf of your wild one. You may even have to get very firm on what is included in your box of parenting ideas and remind them that no, Jamie does not need to be physically punished, and yelling louder at Jane is not the fix to the problem. Number 2, be flexible with you and yourself. To predict the upsets and meltdowns is almost impossible, especially in the beginning, and what worked to help him one day may not work the next. Just when you think she needs holding will immediately turn into a firm push on your chest and the screaming continues. As fast as you learn new tools to help with their wild behaviors, major upsets, she'll have an opposite shift. From white to black, you'll feel hopeless once again. Then black turns to white and in a matter of seconds leaves you scrambling. There's so much more in transitions, control, and tools, many more amazing tools that we've seen make such a difference in our lives. But alas, we don't have time to go into all of that today. But to land this plane, you need to know how brave you are. For investing in you and your child, it is said, in quotations, if we can overcome the issue in their life, then the issues with their child and their children's children will generally be resolved. So today you are laying the foundation of hope for your family's future. Everything you need to raise them is inside of you and inside of them. My job is to teach you how to find those gems and implement them in practical ways. Because you are here this morning, transformation begins today. You will no longer think of your parenting journey as going down the toilet or that you are drowning. Your focus is spiraling upwards. So thank you so much for joining. It's just been a privilege to be here.
Yay, here she is. Cynthia, I love, you know what? Your talk is for all of parents, not just with children with special needs, but wow, I love that. I love that horse blinders analogy. That was amazing. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of a meeting format. So if you have questions, comments, feel free to just unmute your mic and say, Cynthia. I'll just check the chat box here. But
yeah, you bet.
Okay, Nicole says, wow, that was incredible. She missed the beginning and she wanted to know, what was your son's diagnosis again? It sounds just like her son.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Nicole. You know, the first diagnosis that we ever had, my son was about, between 2.5 and 3, and we were in the hospital. And just by being there for a couple of days and his interaction with the doctor, right there, he nailed this diagnosis on us that he was severely autistic. And he says, within 2 weeks, I want you in my clinic and we're putting your son on antipsychotics. I collapsed. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't, like, it was way too much information at the time. So I actually let it down. I had to not pick it up and carry it. And we took a little bit more time, probably months of time, and sought out a different doctor. We tried this one actually in person with my son, and it was like, no, it's not working. Tried another one. No, that wasn't working. So I encourage you to just keep going down the line to find a match, because it's so important. But yeah, his original, or his official, I guess, diagnosis was autism and developmental delay and sensory processing disorder, as well as anxiety disorder. But here's the thing, having these connections and having these tools, you would meet my son and you'd go, huh, I don't see it. So it's quite amazing when you get to that place where it's calm and you have that exchange back and forth. There were years where we couldn't do any sarcasm. We couldn't do any joking. He'd be like, I don't know what you mean. He would scream at us, I don't know what you mean. And we would just be like, oh my gosh, we can't even joke with him. And now it's so cute. He started out going, like, saying little jokes to us. And then we're like, what? Did you actually say that? And then he would remind us, that was a joke. Like, it's funny. And so he was able to work into what sarcasm means. He still can't quite get it, but it's just been quite a brilliant process to see him change over the years.
Thank you, Cynthia. Can I ask one more question about homeschooling? Take it very easy and go slow with him.
We did very easy and very, very slow. He loves to play. He's a video gamer. And we did a lot of card games for math. And, I put up maps for geography. It was literally like bypassing in the hallway and going, oh, I'm interested in that. Or watching a documentary. And he actually learned his grammar for English on Roblox, if you can believe that. Because there was a job he wanted to be a sandwich artist on Roblox, but it took him having to like type in and apply for the job. And he tried like 25 times, I kid you not. He would slam his earphones down. He would run away from the computer because he was so mad he didn't get accepted. And all of a sudden one day he got an interview and he was so proud of himself because he's like, Mom, I did the grammar right. Like, I got all the words and the punctuation. And I was like, yes, dude. But he had to do it not realizing he was learning, because every time, we would put something in front of, like, you need to learn this. This is important. This is important. He's like, to heck with you. Like, it had to be his idea.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. This is exactly what I needed to hear.
Oh, it's so good, Nicole. I'm glad you're here.
So we have a comment from Deborah. We're starting to work on the jokes now at 12. He's still shaky on sarcasm, but we try and do it in a safe way.
Perfect. That's beautiful. And that is exactly it. You move at their pace. You know, the world isn't always nice that way. It's very, very fast. And stuff just comes at them. And, you know, just like I said, when we were at that family function, he's looking at people's faces and he's like, I don't know if that emotion is for me. I don't know if that sarcasm was meant for me. He just couldn't digest it all. And we found that when we slowed down the input towards him, he started to bite on it and chew on it and process it, and he could trust it. You know, I remember our doctor saying for him, it's like he's here all the time. He's got his foot on the brake and his foot on the gas pedal at the same time. So he's holding it here, trying to not burn out.
Mm-hmm.
That's really tough. She even described it like walking through Las Vegas as an adult with a migraine at night.
Oh,
That's hard for them, right? So if you think about what's happening, like what's on their shoulders, what's around them, because it's like this, right? It's right in front of them all the time. And then we come in and we're like, do this, like process this, here's this. We could be totally well-meaning. And they're like, God, I hate you. I can't take this anymore. And you're the one who they hit you, like they hit because you're right in front of them. And that's when, you know, they're in that safe place and they explode. And I realized like he didn't actually hate on me. He would say those things, but it was just because his head was now under. And so if there's anything that I can add that would help make it easier, is don't take offense. When I stopped taking offense, like my life changed. So I was like, this is not towards me. This is not about me. This isn't actually between us. This is him saying all the things he can't say out in the world because the world's not safe.
Yeah.
Not for him. This is safe right here. Explode, kid. Do whatever you need to do to get that out. And then let's talk about it.
So I remember my husband used to travel a lot for work. And so I'd have 4 or 5 kids on my own. So I had 3 kids that were very spirited. So they'd be throwing tantrums at age 7 or, you know, beyond the toddler years. And, you know, people out there would make comments. They would say things like, all that girl needs is a good spanking. And I'm like, the hardest thing is to not, like, you hear those things and logically you say to yourself, you know, it's not about me, it's about them. I'm just going to ignore that. But it's really hard. Like, it's hard not to let it wreck your day because you take it home and you think about it again and you think of the comeback you should have had, but you didn't. Like, how do you recover from that? Other than listening to you you were great in that, you know, think of the dignity of you and the dignity of your child. This is what I need to hear. I need to see that in those moments. But what are your best ways to recover from that?
Oh my gosh. I think for a lot of years, actually, just to be straight out and clear, I did go to bed and I did pull the covers over my head. And I was like, I can't do today.
Mm-hmm.
I closed the windows, I locked the doors, and you don't even mean to shut out your favorite people, but even that almost becomes too much. And we had just moved to a small community, and we were just getting our youngest into play school. And I had a lady yell across the playground because he had a meltdown inside. And she's like, you know, if you would have started this a long time ago, he wouldn't be like this now. And she's with her friend, right? And I'm like, why are we so mean to each other? I don't understand this. And it is a process, Judy. It really takes some time. You actually have to get to the point where you trust you. You just trust you. And you just trust that that what you're doing is the best for your child. Like when I talk about, like what's inside of you and what's inside of them. And I kind of link it to what I believe most every child is saying. And it's please hear what I'm not saying. When I tuned into that with him, then everybody else's voices kind of faded. And yes, it's true. It is just about them. But a friend of mine gave me some really good advice. And she's like, Cynthia, you can't throw stones at every dog that barks. And these are barking dogs. They're just like, and surrounding yourself with those people that know you, and just having those people in your life for certain amounts of time. Like I remember having to kind of shut out the rest of it. There was places we didn't go. And it felt like a sacrifice kind of in a way. And yet when I saw him change and settle and things became more peaceful, it did make it easier. And sometimes we avoided going to busy places because I knew that would set him off. So, there is you got to wiggle in those areas where it's like, oh, do I want to like deal with those people right now? Because you kind of know that, this is going to be a trigger. And figuring out some of those triggers makes a really, really big difference. But I don't think that you ever get a thing
in yourself and your knowledge of your kids. You said it as well, Cynthia, but please do, because the only regret I have right now is that I didn't do what I did 5 years earlier.
Yep. It's so true. It's so true. And it's hard to have that, to show that confidence when you don't feel it on the inside. And I want to relate it to when we were going to homeschool or home educate, I should say. When my kids were begging for it, there was still that little bit like, what, if this doesn't go well, I'm going to threaten to send them back to school. And, you hold that over them and it's like, what a stupid thing. That was like my mother when we wouldn't nap before kindergarten. She says, if you don't have a nap right now, I'm putting you in the Hutterite colony. And I'm like, what? That's terrible. Why do we do these stupid threats? And it's like, anyways, but I realized that it was like when I just decided and joyfully decided and said, we're doing this, come hell or high water, we're doing this. It may go wonky, it may go to one side, but school wasn't going in the right direction. And I mean, this isn't even just about home education, but it's about anything. It's like, what are we deciding to do? Let's just go in that direction, see where it takes us. We may hit a different trail, but at least we're going in a direction.
Absolutely. I'm just going to reiterate for the recording, or Deborah said, the biggest thing I would pass on personally is be confident in your own judgment about your kids. And that's what Cynthia was just talking about. And that is so true. We have all these experts talking to us every day about a teacher's professional opinion, or OT's special professional opinion, or doctors or psychologists or psychiatrists. I can't tell you the number of times we went against their advice and went with our intuition, and it was the right thing to do. I can't say, looking back over 5 kids, that I made a wrong decision and should have gone with the expert's decision. I can't say I've ever done that. I remember all 5 of my kids were overdue, and I was always being pressured to induce. I know my kids want to spend some more home time in the womb. I know that, right? And I'm going to fight for that. So yes, be confident in your own judgment about your kids, because the rest of the world's wanting to take that away from you, and you need to protect that.
Yeah, one of the biggest things we had was a school counselor say to us when he got violent was to sit on him, cross his arms, and pin him down. Oh yeah. He was like, he needs to know that this is wrong. And I mean, you do what the expert says. And I mean, I didn't ever hurt him, like I wasn't there to hurt him, but, held his arms down so he didn't punch me. And I just remember the one time he was screaming at me. He wasn't even able to be verbal up until that point, but all of a sudden he got his voice and he says to me, "Mom, it's not working. This doesn't work." And I was like, whoa. Instantly, both of us were just like crocodile tears. And that's where I want to say, to cancel the shame, because we carry that shame with us. Like Deborah, you said, I want to redo those 6 years. And it's like, you know what? There's so much grace for that. There's so much that covers over that, because now you're connecting. And that connection just creates something that it's such a continuation, like we talked about, that foundation that you build now. It covers over all of that. It's a new foundation even. And that has helped me, because I've even said to my kids, I'm like, "Oh, do you remember when I used to do that? Like, oh, that's terrible. I feel bad now." And they're like, "Oh, I don't really remember." It's like, oh, well, it's not a big deal now. And you get that connection with them and it changes everything. So
That's so true. And when my kids were home from university, I said to them, "Do you remember all those times I yelled at you? Like, I was such a yeller." And they didn't. And you know what? The brain research says that kids remember the things that are out of the ordinary. Like the one time my husband got mad at my son in the car and he turned around and he threw the car keys at him. My son remembers that. He doesn't remember, 27 years of patience and,
no.
and love and nurturing. No, that's taken for granted. Remembers the one time he threw the car keys. And now that they're older, I explain that. I say, well, parents are not perfect. There is no perfect parents. We all make mistakes. I have done things that I regret. And especially for the first children, because they're the guinea pigs, right? Like you try things and it doesn't work, so you don't try it in the rest. But that's parenting. And you know what? It all works out in the wash. Kids don't remember most of that stuff. They grow up and they remember your nurturing and your caring. They do. Especially when they're older and you have less reason to yell at them.
Yeah. I was terrified. I was terrified when he was little what the teen years were going to be like, because I'm like, he's going to grow up, he's going to be bigger, and he's going to be stronger. And it was the most amazing thing when we started to, clue into him. And like I talked about, with the story of being by his chair and realizing like, he's just not recognizing my armor. I'm fighting for him, but he's seeing us fighting against him. And when it took time. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is people just think like, these experts have a new kid in 5 days. And I'm like, that's not, that isn't long lasting. What we're looking for is raising adults. Mm-hmm. Like whether they've got these difficulties as a child or we are raising adults. Mm-hmm. We don't get these little babies forever. And what you need when they get older is connection. You need to be connected, have a bond. And there was a story that a guy told in a speaker from a few weeks ago that I listened to. And he said, if I was to come to you, hang on to one side of the tissue and give you the other side of the tissue, and we don't have a connection, and I put a lot of tension on that tissue, what happens? It rips. Mm-hmm. But if I give you a rope and we have a tug of war back and forth, it may come a little bit more to my side and it may go a little bit more to your side, but we're both hanging on. And that is my goal with my kids and, helping other people grab a hold of that permission to build that. Because sometimes we are like, but what if I lose control? And I'm like, you won't. There's no control to be lost. You didn't have it in the first place. So let it down, let down the anxiety with that and grab a hold of that rope. And when they learn to trust you and hang on, you've got that solid forever.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. And I find it, I mean, you haven't really touched on this, but I know we've talked, is that you build that connection through trust and communication, and taking that fear out of that parent-child relationship, right? Like, they have to not fear you. They have to trust you. You're their safe port. So I'm in that stage. My kids are in the 20 to 30. My stage now is teaching them. They've dealt with anxiety, depression, learning differently. So my job is to teach them to advocate for themselves, right? Because they're between 20 and 30 now, because the rest of the world doesn't talk to me, they talk to them. So, but for them to come to you, so you're kind of the coach behind the curtain in that. So, for example, my son would write an email to his professor. I would encourage him to reach out to his professor. He would rather die than do that because he has incredible anxiety. So but with that connection between us, he trusts that if he asks me to look over the email before he sends it, it's only one sentence, that I'm going to help him out with that, right?
Exactly.
So what do you see ahead? Do you think building that connection helps them grow into adulthood? And how do you see that self-advocacy working out?
It's an amazing question. I think when you remove that fear, like you talked about, and you have that connection where they do trust you, there is a growth that takes place inside of them that I think even protects them from other people coming in and controlling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually another teaching that I do, a video series where I talk about that control and how if they only know to be controlled, then we think that they're going to go out into the world and they're going to take by what we taught them and what we taught them to think and use that. When in actual fact, they're going to search for somebody who had equal control to what you did as the parent in order to help them through.
Mm-hmm.
And when you erase that and you teach them how to think, at your son's age, there's still a developmental thing that's happening. Like some kids can grab a hold of that and they can do that by themselves, and other kids can't quite yet, because there's probably lots of things that he can do on his own. But there's this one thing that, it's like, I need my mom to check this over, but you're still not doing it for him.
Mm-hmm.
And it is going to be slower, I believe, for my boys, the advocacy part on behalf of themselves. But because they've seen it modeled, and you give them just little bits at a time, and that just takes wisdom. It takes letting go little bits back and forth, and just playing around with it. And I think that's even way more fun in parenting than trying to parent them. It's coming alongside and saying, okay, so an example, this is really simple for our age group. We're still learning how to order at a restaurant, at a takeout. And so he's just wondering, like, how do I order? He knows what he wants. And I'm like, okay, well, you got to tap your debit card and you got to talk to them. And he's like, well, I just need you to stand beside me. And sometimes there are those times in their life where they still need you to stand beside them. But I am absolutely positive that going forward, they will take hold and they will have that confidence. And these are some transformational truths that I write. This is a couple of them. It says, my kids know how to brainstorm, problem solve, and make good decisions. They are confident, strong-minded, and hopeful in every situation they face. And I am raising leaders.
Aw.
And, so there's more about that, or even I have increased hope about my kids now and for the future. And I'm not one of those, like, say it, proclaim it, and, not like that. But sometimes you get on those days where, like, oh, I don't know. Like when Elliot was little, I'd be like, is he going to end up in jail? Because he was so violent. And so I feared that, right? And it's like, okay, so I'm fearing, and then I'm projecting that fear, but what if I change that? So it wasn't about what I was saying necessarily. It was about changing about what am I believing for them for the future.
Nice.
And that's part of the foundation for me anyway.
Nice. That's great. Very helpful. Okay, we're almost out of time. Cynthia, do you coach? Do you consult? Do you run classes? Where can people find you?
I do. I am at cynthiafehr.com, and I am 75% done my video series. So I'm going to be putting that out there shortly. And I created it in bite-sized chunks because parents are super busy. I know that you sometimes have about 5 minutes on the toilet, and that's it. So it's easily digestible, but at the same time, there's powerful stuff in there. And then shortly after that, I've got another video series coming up that will be in the same format, just on different topics. And but yeah, there's lots. I mean, even if you just want encouragement, go read my About Me page. Just check out a few of our stories. I've got some blogs on there too that you might resonate with. And yeah, I'm on Facebook, and is Cynthia Fehr on Facebook, but also Instagram is Calm Raging Waters. So yeah, reach out, get in touch with me. Shoot me an email. I would love to connect.
Oh, that is great. Well, thank you, Cynthia. Thanks for sharing your story today. And your boys sound lovely. I hope to meet them someday.
Oh, absolutely. No, thank you so much. It is true. It really is a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you, Judy, for hosting.
Well, thank you for sharing lots of knowledge and wisdom there. So you're getting a lot of thanks in the chat box. So,
so good. So glad. Yeah. Yeah. Take care, everybody.
Okay.
I'm so glad that it was helpful.
Bye.
Thanks, Judy. Bye-bye.
Bye, Cynthia.
Everyone.